Welcome to this explainer. Today we're talking about something that is going to hit incredibly close to home for pretty much every young professional out there. We're essentially holding a mirror right up to that career hesitation and the intense analysis paralysis that can so easily take hold of us. You know the exact feeling I'm talking about, right? Standing on the absolute edge of a big move, maybe a new project, or just a giant leap of faith, and you completely freeze up. Well, through a wonderfully simple but profoundly impactful little Stickman story, today's explainer is going to show you exactly why we self-sabotage, and much more importantly, how we can finally break free.
So, let me just ask you point blank, what are you waiting for? Seriously, picture in your mind right now. Is it that major project you've been putting off all quarter? Maybe it's that difficult but highly necessary email just sitting there in your drafts. Or maybe it's a promotion you absolutely know you deserve but just haven't asked for yet, or a brand new skill you keep saying you'll learn. Just take a second and really think about that one specific thing you are delaying.
Okay, let's dive into this because here is the hard truth we really need to confront today. The perfect time is a total myth. Waiting until you are absolutely 100% ready is a massive trap. We constantly trick ourselves into thinking that eventually, somehow, the stars are going to perfectly align, all our fears are going to vanish, and we'll feel perfectly equipped to take the leap. But as our source material beautifully illustrates, that moment simply does not exist.
Concept 1. The Trap of Tomorrow.
Imagine this metaphorical, kinda endearing little stickman standing completely alone in a blank white room. There are no distractions, no other people, just him. And right in front of him is a single, solitary closed door. On that door is a label that literally reads, "Your Dream." He reaches for the handle, but right as his hand is about to actually grasp it, he stops. He pulls back and says to himself, "Maybe tomorrow. I'm just not ready yet." And he walks away. But the heartbreak here is, the very next day, he returns to the exact same door, facing the exact same dream, and he repeats the exact same excuse, "I'm not ready yet," and he leaves again.
Which brings us to part 2. The cost of waiting.
We always tell ourselves that a one-day delay doesn't really matter, right? But tomorrow compounds. The days become weeks, the weeks morph into months, and terrifyingly, the months turn into years. Imagine the wall of that white room just slowly filling up with calendar pages. Then, one page falls, then another, then hundreds more flutter to the floor. The stickman is just watching them fall, doing absolutely nothing because time never stops, even when we do. He isn't standing still because he can't open the door. He's standing still because he is hopelessly waiting for a perfect moment that is never coming. As all this time passes, the silence of the room gets filled with his own internal doubts. What if I fail? What if people laugh at me? What if I'm just not good enough? If you're a young professional, you probably recognize these exact questions. This is the very loud voice of imposter syndrome. It's that anxiety telling us we don't belong in the room or we just aren't qualified to lead the project. But notice something absolutely vital here. The door never says a word to the stickman. The door doesn't judge him. It doesn't tell him he isn't ready. The door simply waits. The doubt is entirely internal.
Eventually, all this hesitation catches up to him in a pretty devastating way. The stickman walks up to a mirror, but when he looks into the glass, he doesn't see his own reflection. Instead, he sees all this potential he's wasted. He sees the books he never read, the skills he never learned, the dreams he never chased. He sees the absolute ghost of the professional and personal life he could have had, if only he hadn't been so paralyzed by the wait.
So, the crucial point is this. Waiting actually has a massive cost. We so often think of failure as the most expensive possible outcome. We think that if we open the door and fail, we've lost everything. But the stickman's mirror reveals the real truth. Endless hesitation is far more expensive and honestly far more painful than temporary failure could ever be.
And that leads us to a huge turning point. Concept 3. The illusion of the lock. Our stickman, having finally seen the heavy toll of his inaction, decides he just cannot live this way anymore. He takes one massive, deep breath. He walks straight back to the door, hands shaking. The momentum is building, the energy is completely shifting, and he is finally ready to confront this barrier. But here's the massive realization. His hands are shaking not because the door is locked, but because fear is. There was literally never a physical barrier holding him back. No key he needed to find, no external permission slip he needed to be granted. The lock was a total illusion created by his own mindset. Slowly, despite the shaking, he grabs the handle. He turns it, and the door opens.
Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when that handle finally turns. We all have this huge fantasy of what lies behind it, right? We expect treasure, some magical shortcut, or instant effortless success. We think crossing the threshold just means we've made it. But what is actually there? A long, unglamorous, super intimidating staircase. There is no instant gratification behind your career goals, only the daily grind and the really hard work required to climb.
Part 4. Embracing the climb.
The stickman doesn't retreat when he sees those stairs. He smiles, shifts his pacing, and steps right up. And look, let's not sugarcoat it. The first step is difficult. The second step actually hurts. By the third, it feels completely impossible. Kind of like trying to understand your company's expense report software, right? This is the harsh reality of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Sometimes he falls down. Sometimes the exhaustion is so much that he just has to stop and sit on the stairs. But the defining factor here is that every single time he gets back up.
Because each step literally makes you stronger. True success isn't just hiding in a chest somewhere behind a door. It is actively forged in the muscle and the absolute grit you build on these stairs. Every difficult email you finally send, every challenging meeting you navigate, every single time you push through that imposter syndrome, that is a step building your capacity for altitude.
Concept 5. Your time to start.
After a long, absolutely exhausting climb, the stickman finally reaches the top of the stairs, catches his breath, and looks back down at the incredible distance he's covered. He looks at all those difficult, painful steps, and he just smiles. But in that moment of victory, he realizes something genuinely surprising. Let this sink in for a second. The hardest part was never actually climbing those stairs. It was opening the door. All that physical exertion, all the late nights, all the falling down and getting back up, none of that required as much sheer courage as simply turning the handle in that white room. Starting is always, without exception, the ultimate hurdle. Having learned this profound lesson, the stickman takes a blank piece of paper and writes down this exact sentence. There is no perfect time. There is only the time you decide to begin. He takes that paper, places it firmly on the wall for himself as a reminder, and then he turns and walks straight toward another closed door. But this time, he smiles. He doesn't wait for tomorrow. He opens it immediately, without a single second of hesitation.
I really want to serve you this massive, bold quote from our source as the definitive takeaway for this whole explainer. The perfect time never arrives. Successful people simply start before they feel ready. Let this completely shatter any lingering excuses you might still be holding on to today. You are never going to feel 100% ready for the promotion, the big career pivot, or that massive pitch. The secret of the professionals you admire isn't that they lacked fear, it's that they turned the handle anyway. Which brings us right back to you. We've seen the trap, we've seen the illusion of the lock, and we've seen the reality of the climb. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. What is your door, and will you open it today? Stop waiting for a tomorrow that is never going to be perfect. Walk right up to the door, accept that your hands might shake, and take your first step right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and honestly, I cannot wait to see what you achieve when you finally turn the handle.